Welcome to the Way of Biohacking podcast. This is Dr. Tai, and today...
Welcome everybody, it's Nikki, wellness intern of days.
Alright, today Linda is away. I believe she's in...
I think she's in California.
California/Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll be missing her today, and today's topic is misconceptions in health, and I think there's a lot of that, and there's so many different perspectives on it. Nikki, how about you start us off today? What do you want?
Well, I learned so many of these misconceptions when I was in school. I was in a lot of nutrition classes and biology classes, and there's so many things that they'll just teach you where you're like, I don't think that that's right. One of them, the biggest one in my opinion, was canola oil being good for your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember on a test once I had to purposely answer wrong. Purposely answer right, but I knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
I was like, which one of these fats are heart healthy? And the answer was canola oil. I was like, that's so not true. It's so inflammatory and bad. And it shows a lot of how dated some things can be, the sciences. And also another big one is saturated fat.
Yeah.
They really go in on saturated fat being bad. There's whole chapters on why unsaturated fat is better and saturated fat's bad. Coconut oil is super high in saturated fat, and it's fantastic. It's for MCTs, for brain health.
Yeah.
It's really good.
When was the first time you tried MCT oil?
Well, I eat a lot of butter for my saturated fat. I eat half a stick of butter a day.
Yeah.
MCT oil, it could be rough on the GI for people that have sensitive digestive systems like me. So it kind of would give me the runs. Mm-hmm. But I took it for a while, and because it made my brain loved it.
Yeah. And
my brain also loves butter, but for someone who couldn't tolerate MCT oil that great,
yeah,
I do butter.
I mean, when I eat, I haven't eaten takeout Chinese food in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And when I work at the office, when I used to work in the beginning of my career, I used to order Chinese food. And whenever I eat that stuff, I go into this brain fog, and I want to go to sleep. And especially with General Tso chicken, mm-hmm. right? I was just oh man, I can't stay awake. I need another cup of coffee, and I just had one. Why do I feel so bad? And that's my brain getting inflamed, mm-hmm. right? But on the opposite side, you take bulletproof coffee, and then you're oh my god, I feel more awake, more energetic, and this is not just a caffeine situation. It's just my brain feels better, and that comes from saturated fat,
mm-hmm.
coconuts.
Yeah, and if I was to go to class and with a coffee cup, and my teacher would say, "Oh, what's in your coffee?" They'd just say, "Oh, half a stick of butter." Mm-hmm. They'd probably say, "That's so unhealthy. It's bad for your heart." Yeah. Blah blah blah. But it's really good. It's really good. There's a lot of nutrients in butter, vitamin K.
Yeah.
Raw, good grass-fed dairy is good. The omega-3s in grass-fed butter is super high also. And it's interesting because there's such a big difference between the omega-3s in grass-fed butter and the omega-3s in grain-fed. Grain-fed is so much higher in omega-6.
I mean, this whole topic that we're talking about, misconceptions in health, is one of them is a lot of research was just done badly over the years. A lot of research that was done badly over the years. And what I mean by that is I think Joe Rogan was talking about it in his podcast, was that meat would be causing, what was it, because he went on the carnivore mm-hmm. Diet, and he was talking about how the meat was causing more cancer and all this stuff, but those research was done on non-grass-fed meat, mm-hmm. right? So if you look at those scientific studies, did we really know about grass-fed beef versus non-grass-fed beef when the study was conducted, mm-hmm. right? And there's this whole misconception about milk as well. Chinese medicine practitioners saying, dairy causes mucus, right? And my friend Eric Levinson was talking about this, right? And he's showing me all of this scientific research articles on it, but then I don't want to get into a huge ongoing conversation via Facebook, right? So like one thing I want to say is that like if you're drinking like non-pasteurized milk from coming from a farm where you know the animal is healthy and stuff like that, that stuff is amazing for you, right? But if you're taking milk from a grain-fed, corn-fed like source, that stuff is bad for you, right?
Super inflammatory. Plus the casein is a A1 casein. It's really inflammatory. A lot of people with like bad guts can't tolerate it. I can't tolerate a dairy. Besides butter, I tolerate really well.
Another fish that goes really bad is like tilapia and shrimp, because the way they were farmed was really bad, because they were feeding them like, I don't know what the details were, but if the animal eats horrific stuff and you're eating the animal, then you're taking in all that bad things. Right?
And along with antibiotics, when an animal's antibiotic fed, I always try to, even with like pork, it's hard to get like really well fed pork, but I always look for antibiotic free. And I want to go back to what you said about meat, meat causing cancer. All of the studies that's based off of are really old studies, and they're also survey studies.
Okay.
So what they'll do is they'll give 100,000 people a survey. How much meat have you eaten in the last year?
Right.
And it's just like, they don't really get like exact numbers of how much meat. And then they say, all right, have you been diagnosed with any health problems? And they'll say, yeah, I ate this much meat this year. I was diagnosed with this. And they say, oh, the conclusion is meat causes this. But, we're not asking them what else they're eating with that meat. They might be eating, pasta and meatballs, like really inflammatory stuff. And with a bunch of, it's also probably grain-fed meat. So it's inflammatory stuff. They're not eating the stuff that's a lot better. So people don't discuss how the studies were conducted. They just say, oh, look at this study. It says meat is linked to this.
I think that's one of my pet peeves about a lot of the studies being conducted and a lot of biohackers talk about. In this study, it talks about this and that and that, but they really just reading the study. They're not really studying the methodology and questioning it. And I think that leads to a lot of misconceptions and debates, right? And who is it really funded by?
That too. That's a big one. Is you got to check who funds the studies. A lot of the studies that were done in like the 80s were the survey studies. They were funded by Coca-Cola, General Mills, like people that would profit, companies that would profit off of people thinking that meat is bad. All right, meat's bad. I'm not going to eat, I'll have, cereal or something that's worse for them, but it seems that it's marketed to be better.
I mean, right now, a lot of people are gearing towards, holistic, more natural living, less clutter. They're moving towards that direction because it's just liberating for a lot of different people in terms of like, you could see that in the Netflix special, Marie Kondo. It's this Japanese woman, and she comes into your home and like she thanks the house, and she shows you how to tidy up your home. And these people got so much gunk, so much clothes, so much like clutter, things that they really don't need. And she uses this like spark joy concept where you're holding a shirt that you haven't worn for 18 months, and if you're holding on to it, if it doesn't spark joy, you say thank you and you let it go. And if you look at the faces of the people who go through the Kondo method, at the beginning of the show they're like, oh, there's overwhelming like clutter in my home and it's not organized, and all of a sudden when they tidy up, like they look like years younger. It's
very interesting how the environment has effect on their mental health, their physical health. But another misconception I'd like to talk about is most people have a notion that egg yolks are bad for them. And to me that's insane. Like I don't eat egg whites, I just eat the yolks. And people do it flipped. Opposite, like they'll just eat the whites. And a lot of people can tolerate egg whites. There's an amino acid in egg whites called albumin. And for a lot of people it can cause GI problems. When people eat eggs, they say, oh, I'm gassy now. I have to eat eggs. A lot of egg whites make people gassy, and they think that it's the yolk that's giving them gas. No, it's the egg white. I eat like 5-6 egg yolks a day, and they're so high in choline, in keratin, vitamins, like almost all the vitamins. The yolk is meant to be the nutrition for the chicken cell. That's the yolk. and it's great nutrition for us also. And pasture raised good eggs, you'll see that they're darker.
Yeah.
It's higher in keratin. It means that it was fed a better diet. It's a better egg. Darker the better.
Orange, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's not like yellow and stuff like that. Yeah. So how do you eat your eggs?
I'll separate the whites from the yolks, and I'll leave one white so that they don't burn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my mom eats the whites, and then I'll just put them on the pan with some butter and close the lid and wait for them to like cook halfway through. I like them a little bit runny, and then once they're like a little soft, a little runny, I'll dip my bacon in them, and I'll kind of use them as like a egg yolk dip. I'll like scoop bacon into the yolk, and I'll eat it like that. It's really good.
I use the what is that? One way that I cook the egg. Once again, to my friend Eric, he showed me this method. You take a bowl of water, right, and you cook it in a pot. So you're boiling water, and once the water is boiling, you take a spoon and you spin the water, right? And while the water is spinning, you crack an egg in, right? And then you take a net and you scoop it out, and you just made not a fried egg.
It's like kind of poached.
It kind of poached, and then you put it on your plate, and then you dress it with oil, like olive oil. This way it's not like, cooked oil, and then you serve yourself like that. I used to do that a lot, but now I just cook it with butter, like really low heat, and I try to cook it for a longer time.
I recently I heated up bone broth really hot, and I put the bone broth on the stovetop, and while it was really hot, I just took a few yolks and poured it and did like an egg drop. It was really tasty. And that's a good way to just get eggs. I like hard-boiled eggs, but I don't eat I crack them and I'll just eat the whites. I eat them a lot after a workout. They're really high in leucine, which is a amino acid that helps with muscle building, and it spikes insulin pretty well. But yeah, no, it's such a common misconception that everyone's like, oh, the egg yolks are unhealthy. They're unhealthy. And even if you look it up, once I had like this debate with someone where I was saying like, no, like the yolks are really healthy. The whites are fine. I don't think whites are bad, but personally I don't eat them. And this person looked it up on Google and I said, look, like it says the yolk is where all the fat is. They're full of fat. And like people still have that notion that all fat is bad. Like, yeah, that fat in there is high omega-3. Like it's nutrient dense. It's really good. But
I guess it could be bad if they researched the eggs that was fed like, grain fed.
Yeah, if you're getting the eggs at like the dollar store, they're probably not great.
Okay. That's just eggs. I think people have misconceptions about hydration, right? They drink coffee, right? And they believe that's water, right? Like, I just hydrated with water. It's liquid. I don't know what you're talking about, right? In fact, where the body is costing the body water to process this coffee, and they go to the bathroom and they actually peed more than the amount of coffee that they drank.
Yeah, I think it's a diuretic. I think coffee's a diuretic.
Yeah, it's a diuretic. And then they're like, okay, let me drink some water to hydrate, right? But they just broke even, right? And you need to compensate to drink more than what you have already peed out. So I have people who work out, right? Because, modern day, you got to stay fit, right? You're working out. And most people, they don't stretch, right? And then on top of that, they don't drink water. And they continue to drink coffee because they feel like when they wake up in the morning, when they drink coffee, it helps them go. Of course it's going to help you go, because in your large intestine, it's a diuretic. It's drawing out water, right? And it's lubricating your bowels and is helping you go. My buddy Giuliano, he's like, it helps me go. I'm like, yeah, start hydrating and you'll be able to go even better.
Yeah.
And he fixed that habit because now he understands that, if he needs coffee to help him go, he knows that he's dehydrated.
That's very interesting. Yeah, a lot of people are addicted to caffeine and coffee. I drink sometimes. I'll drink decaf coffee, maybe once a month. I drink espresso, like decaf black espresso with butter. I put butter in everything, but I don't drink it too much. When I drink it a lot, a few days in a row, I feel like I'll kind of be foggy. I don't really know why, but
dehydration.
That's me. It's probably that. It's probably that. And another thing about dehydration is we're not getting the right water. We're just drinking bottled like plastic bottled water where there's a bunch of plastic in it and it's messing with your hormones and all that stuff. I do glass bottles most of the time. I try to do glass bottles unless it's really convenient for me to just grab a plastic bottle. But I'm for my apartment, I'm doing all glass for food storage. I'm doing all glass everything. I'm not doing any plastics. So I've also noticed a difference when I started doing that. Is I was never really able to like grow facial hair. I'm still not. I have a little scruff because I haven't shaved. But when I stopped drinking out of plastic bottles and I stopped using cologne and I did glass bottles, I noticed that I was getting more like facial hair like by my cheeks and stuff. And I was like, my hormones. It's helped my hormones.
I think to attract the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever you're trying to attract your partners, people use colognes and perfumes, right? But if you really think about it, that's really hurting you, and that's a misconception, right? Because you are disrupting your hormones with all the chemicals inside those things, and you're trying to chemically attract with a scent that is actually disrupting your own hormones, which is making you weaker. So that's why we talk about using various essential oils, right, to enhance your own scent. Another misconception that I wanted to talk about was back on milk. If you drink unpasteurized milk, it's really good for you. It's really good
raw milk is really good. Colostrum and stuff like that.
However, the government and the food industry does not allow people to sell unpasteurized milk, right? Because I think you can't do quality control at a mass scale in the industrial era.
Yeah, I'd imagine it'd be hard. And a lot of people think like, bacteria equals bad.
Yeah.
When there's bacteria all over our bodies, all over our gut and our brains and everything. There's bacteria everywhere.
I think, it's hard to find people with good sourcing for unpasteurized milk. And I know people who have it. And I think Chinese medicine practitioners, right, because they say stay away from dairy. Dairy causes mucus. That's a misconception, because what it really does, it causes dampness, right? The body becomes more damp. So forget about the human body. Think about a towel that's wet. That's your body, right? And if you put a little bit of sticky stuff like sugar, it makes it more sticky, right? It congeals better, right? And that's what dampness is your electrolytic fluid that becomes congealed. And because your body temperature has heat, it has the ability to cook it. And if it gets cooked twice, so regular fluid, once it gets cooked once, it becomes more damp. The second time it becomes, in Chinese medical theory, is that it becomes phlegm. And phlegm has several stages. It's got the clear stage, it's got the yellow stage, it's got the brown stage, where it's mixed with your green phlegm plus blood, right? And then it's like really bad. So I just wanted to touch upon that because I think my buddy Eric was trying to point out to me that I never said he was wrong about it, right? But there's more to the picture, and I think that just hopefully it kind of like clarifies that, right?
Also, a raw Parmesan cheese is really good. It's super high in K2, vitamin K2, which vitamin K2 is really important for the proper absorption of vitamin D. And so it's hard to find raw Parmesan, but it's possible. I've seen it at Whole Foods, and it's hard to find raw and grass-fed, but they have had it at Whole Foods. I didn't get it because I don't typically get dairy, but since it's a Parmesan, it's also really low in that casein that's inflammatory. So Parmesan cheese is actually a lot better than I used to think. I used to be really like kind of anti-dairy, but I've learned a lot since then. I think raw grass-fed Parmesan is a nice healthy choice.
What is that? I was talking to one of my recent patients who comes from India, right? And I was trying to tell her, like, look, it's very important to not eat cooked oils. Whoever is cooking your food, that stuff is really bad. And they make ghee, right? And I'm like, make sure it's grass-fed source, right? But the person who makes the ghee at this person's house is almost like a grandma, right? In her perspective, right, is that with let's say $20, right, of regular milk, right, that's not grass-fed source, it can create this many meals. But you want me to get $40 milk, that's like more expensive, an example, to create the same amount of meals. So this generation was facing like starvation, right? And they had a lot of family members. Like my grandparents would be like, with this amount of money, I can feed this many heads, and as long as their tummies are filled, it will be better. Whereas today, you want to be fed with quality products, not quantity products, and you want to care about where it's sourcing, because ultimately it has an environmental impact, right?
And yeah, it's a good that's a good point. The other day I ate 2 meals. I had my eggs, I think I had like a half a pear, and bacon, but then in the evening, like lunchtime, I had a steak, and what we were gonna have for dinner I didn't really want, so I just skipped that meal. That's a good notion, is quality over quantity. I ate really good food for a good amount of the day, and I wasn't even that hungry, because I don't really get that hungry.
Yeah.
So I just skipped dinner, and I waited the next morning. I had the same eggs, bacon is what I usually have, sometimes sausage. But I just skipped it, and I was okay. And that's what you brought up about dairy. It makes me think about my parents. Forever they've been cooking with olive oil, and olive oil is great to eat without cooking it.
Yeah, without cooking
just
it.
drizzling it on a steak or a salad. It's good, but it has a really low smoke point. So when you cook with it, it will become rancid, and it becomes inflammatory. So you can't cook with olive oil. I mean, a lot of people do, but you shouldn't. It becomes pretty detrimental.
That's one of my pet peeves when we're having a barbecue, right? And like right before you cook stuff, like you see so many chefs like Gordon Ramsay and like all these chefs that you see on YouTube and TV, where they dress it with olive oil, and then you're like, it tastes so good. And then if you don't do it without it, it doesn't taste as good. So is it that people are addicted to the taste, that they're willing to sacrifice their health for it? Whereas I don't care about the taste, right? I want to eat something healthy.
Yeah, me too.
I'd rather cook the steak with butter and like some herbs and things like that, and not dress it with olive oil.
And it tastes really good when you cook anything in butter.
Yeah.
I think it tastes better than when it's cooked in olive oil.
Yeah.
And it's so much healthier for you. Butter's smoke point is way higher. Ghee also.
Yeah.
The only thing about ghee is it's really expensive. You can buy like the same amount of grass-fed butter for for $3-4, and then when you get ghee, it's like $15. So if I wanted ghee, I would just get butter and make my own ghee. And a lot of people don't know this, but ghee is just clarified butter. So if you wanted to make ghee, you would melt down your butter, and then you would scoop up all the milk solids that will float to the top, and then you have ghee. So butter is much more cost effective.
Last episode we were talking about community and culture, right? So let's show people in future episodes where you and I are cooking the steak the right way.
Okay, right? It's a good idea.
Yeah. So we get some grass-fed steaks, and like instead of like dressing it with olive oil, we'll cook it with butter, right? And at the end, you glaze it with some olive oil.
Yeah, I put olive oil after my steak is done.
Yeah, me too.
And good olive oil is also really sensitive to light. So if you're in the grocery store and you see it in a clear package or a bottle, I would avoid that. It's super sensitive to light, even like lights in the ceiling. So you want it either in like a big can, like I don't know if it's called a can, but like a drum kind of thing, or a dark bottle. They're usually it's usually much more stable.
Okay, what other misconceptions are out there about health? We talked about hydration.
Oh, lectins.
Lectins. All right.
Lectins are a really interesting one. When I was in school, you're kind of taught that all vegetables are great. They're all good for you. And a lot of people can tolerate all the vegetables, but people who have a more sensitive digestive system, certain things like certain veggies like tomatoes, for example, are super high in lectins. And what lectins are, they're really small particles that are so tiny that they can freely pass through the lining of your intestines. So that's what leaky gut kind of stems from, is literally these lectins are leaking through your gut and into your body cavity, and it causes a ton of inflammation. That's why I don't eat nightshades. Eggplant, super high in lectins, tomatoes really high in lectins, so I don't eat either of them. I eat cucumbers and avocados, plants that are much lower in lectins.
I remember as a kid, my mom used to cut the cucumber and saying like the peel is not good for you. And years later, I find out that there's all these vitamins and minerals at the peel, right? And then I hear these plants don't want to be eaten by animals, so they have a protective mechanism, right? And then there's so many people out there. Some people eat it, not get phased by it.
Yeah, I peel my cucumbers. I peel them. Well, they're actually a fruit, but I peel my cucumbers.
And some people eat the peels and not really care about it, right? And so it's hard to say which advice befits some other people. And that's why I think it's very important to talk to a healthcare provider that knows all of these things and custom tailors it for you, right?
Yeah, like I know people who could just grab a tomato and eat it like an apple, and they don't have problems. But if I did that, a few hours later, I'd be like, I just wouldn't feel great. But everyone's different.
One thing that I try to promote to my patients is that there's a guy named Sun Simiao in the Tang Dynasty. He's an acupuncturist and herbalist and plus more. This guy he compiled all the ancient texts together, and he reorganized the ancient texts so that people can learn the theories of yin yang first before the 5 phases, and after the 5 phases you learn the Zhang and Fu organ system, and then so it's a proper way to learn the Chinese medicine theories and applications of it. And he had a lot of anecdotes that he heard from people at war, and these guys were at the battlefield saw people's limbs get chopped off, and they tortured people for information. And a lot of these soldiers, they threw up. It was not because they ate something bad, but it was morally and ethically challenging to witness these things. So Sun Simiao had a saying: if your qi becomes really strong, if your energy of your being becomes so strong, then you can eat or digest anything. And what he was meaning was not just food, but also emotions, right? So in acupuncture, if a person comes in with like gluten sensitivity, right, and most healthcare providers will say, well, stop eating gluten, right? And I have a guy who's no longer gluten sensitive because he became healthier, right? And
yeah, I mean, not that I'm exactly in the same scenario, but I have a sucrase deficiency. You knew about that. But recently I started eating honey, like kind of micro exposing myself to stuff I shouldn't be able to digest. So over time, my digestion of that honey got better and better. And now I'll eat, like today I had like maybe a third of a pear after a workout. Like I used to not be able to do that at all. And a big part of that, I think, was mental, and also the exposure to it. The honey, I think, really helped me. Like a year ago, I wouldn't be able to. If I ate a pear, it would have ruined my day. But I've been fine eating a little bit of fruit, berries, like lower sugar fruits. It's been great.
One of the things that I started doing more and more is I now eat more starches. And people are like, starches are bad. You can't eat it with every meal. It's so fattening. I think if you eat it with the correct proportions, it can be really, really helpful for you. So when I eat meat, I eat it with beans. I try to do that, and I try to put the beans into the salads that I eat, right? So this way I don't have to eat rice. And people say, well, if I eat beans, I get gas, right? And if you do eat beans and get gas, that means that you're not producing the correct amount of enzymes. And one way to have your digestive system get better at it is to eat small bits of it, right? And later on, if you eat the same amount of beans, you won't get gas because your body's producing the correct enzymes to digest it. And same thing goes for people who are lactose intolerant, right? If you consume a little bit of dairy, right, every day, just a little bit, your body gets used to it.
It does take a while, but I'm also, I don't know if I am anymore because I don't really eat that much dairy, but I was lactose intolerant, and I could eat a half a stick of butter a day and be totally fine. But I know butter's really low in lactose. It is a tiny bit, but it's low in lactose. But I feel like a few years ago, if I ate a half a stick of butter, I would have gotten a pretty bad stomachache.
It's the fat in the milk that becomes butter, right?
Yeah.
And is that how they make like skim milk and stuff like that?
I'm not sure how they do skim milk, but I know they put butter, they whip butter.
You whip it.
Yeah, they whip cream until it becomes butter.
Yeah. And I think that's how they make, what is that? The clarified butter? What is it?
Ghee?
Ghee, yeah. That's how they do it.
Yeah, it's filtered after it's made butter. Yeah. But another misconception, I guess it's kind of a misconception. People are kind of catching on to this one, though. But you'll see it on a lot of cereals, is them being heart healthy. Like Cheerios heart healthy.
Yeah.
Like there's no way Cheerios are heart healthy. There's no way. You know, they're going to spike your insulin through the roof, and then your insulin's going to come crashing down, which is going to cause inflammation, and it's going to be a mess. There's no way that type of insulin spike and crash is healthy for your heart.
What is it about Cheerios that they think is so healthy?
I don't know. I think they have to base that off some sort of study. There's probably like one study where they had people eat Cheerios along with like something that is actually heart healthy, and just said like, oh, there's a correlation, maybe not a causation, but there's a correlation, and they were able to label it like that. But there's just no way.
Do you think calcium in milk is good for your bones?
I think that if you get enough vitamin D, then yes. But if you're vitamin D deficient, then I think that you won't absorb it that well.
See, I like the way you answered that because it's based on the context of, it's another variable, right? I think the misconception around milk is that milk doesn't have calcium. If you look at the label, it says fortified, meaning that it was added onto it. Right? And one of the reasons why they fortify milk with calcium is because calcium that comes from the rocks in itself is white. And white goes well with white. Now, if you're drinking like gray milk, like because the calcium was black, it's not black, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like it would change the color of the milk. So they fortify calcium to milk, and this is calcium carbonate, right? Calcium carbonate is almost not like, it's in tiny minuscule of a percentage is absorbable. And
it's not very bioavailable.
Yeah. And what does the marketing companies do? They create calcium citrate, right? And calcium citrate compared to calcium carbonate is only like even a fraction slightly more absorbable. So what do? They advertise calcium citrate to have a higher market value, and then they advertise it as, oh, this is more absorbable, right? And I think that is like such a ripoff to the supplement industry because these two calciums are not that absorbable. Yeah, people are purchasing calcium carbonate and citrate thinking that is more available. Calcium lactate is one chemical reaction away from becoming calcium carbonate, bicarbonate, and that's absorbable. And then there is like real good companies that sell calcium carbonate, bicarbonate, I should say. And then
I've seen ones where they'll sell calcium bicarbonate with vitamin D in one capsule, and that's probably the best way to go.
And the only other calcium carbonate that I know is absorbable is coral calcium, because the chemical structure for calcium carbonate that came from an organic matter, whereas it just comes from the rocks underneath, its structure is not lifelike, and therefore you absorb less. Just like water, and 1 cup of water versus structured water is the same amount of molecules and stuff like that. However, it's structured differently.
Yeah.
Right.
And going back on the Cheerios, I didn't mean Cheerios for the brand of Cheerios. I didn't say that you were unhealthy.
Yeah.
I meant cereal, so there's no legal problems.
What other misconceptions are out there? I think we covered the calcium part, vitamin D part.
Calcium was a good one. I forgot about that. Vitamin D, a lot of people don't get nearly enough vitamin D as they need. I take 15,000 sometimes I use a day. And most people are vitamin D deficient. I remember there was a study done during the height of the pandemic, I'll say. And it was, I think, 90% of all people that were hospitalized were vitamin D deficient.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Like, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal, and it didn't get the coverage that I think it deserved. And it shows how important vitamin D is to immune function and how many people are deficient in it. Most people are.
Great source of vitamin D. It's in mushrooms. A lot of people don't know that. And I recommend people who are vitamin D deficient, next time you go to the supermarket, just buy a bunch of mushrooms, and if you're making like chicken soup, throw a bunch of mushrooms in there, and learn how to throw mushrooms into your diet. You'll get higher vitamin D. Another
thing that people don't know is they think you absorb most vitamin D through your skin. You do absorb a lot, but you absorb more through your eyes. So I've talked to Tom about this. In the morning, I'll open my blinds and I'll just look at the sun for a little bit.
Sun gazing, right.
Yeah, and you absorb a ton of vitamin D just from doing that. You absorb a lot of vitamin D through your eyeballs.
Don't directly look at the sun.
Yeah, I didn't say that.
If you're listening to this podcast or watching this thing, do not look straightly. So you want to look off gaze.
Yeah. So that's what. And open your eyes really wide. That's what I do. I open my eyes really wide, and I'll just try to get in all that sunlight, but not looking directly at the sun.
I recommend people to take vitamin D supplements at night compared to the day.
I do that also. It actually affects your REM sleep.
Yeah.
You sleep better after doing that. Yeah.
Another thing with vitamin D, it works great with vitamin K.
K2. Yeah. It becomes more bioavailable. They interact with each other really well.
Because the vitamin K allows the body to make better osteoblasts, right? Which puts the calcium into the bones, right? So I think that it's good for like that combination vitamin D, K2, and calcium. And not just calcium carbonate, but citrate, but calcium bicarbonate. And if you're getting calcium carbonate, it should be coming from your like coral calcium and stuff like that.
And another vitamin misconception is vitamin C. Vitamin C is important and it's good, but we absorb a really, really small amount through our small intestines. If you were to take vitamin C tablets, I think it's like 200 milligrams you can absorb through your small intestine. So if I was to take 1,000, you're not absorbing most of that. You're just gonna pee it out or excrete it out. So the best way to get vitamin C is through an IV. You'll absorb all of it. I know not everyone has a vitamin drip, but if there's a place near you that offers an IV drip with vitamin C, you'll absorb all of it and you'll feel really good. But a lot of people don't know. They think that vitamin C is the one that I should be like, I take a bunch of vitamin C, it's flu season. You're not gonna absorb most of it.
What about like squeezing lemon into your water in the morning? Is that good? Do you think that's a good way to get vitamin C?
It probably will give you the 200 milligrams.
Okay.
That's appropriate, but I don't see, a lot of people have like emergency packets where they'll do like 2 packets where it's just so much vitamin C and they're not going to absorb all of it. I think getting a natural, with less sugar like the lemon is probably the best way to do. You get your 200 orally.
I was telling patients to squeeze lemon in their morning as a morning regimen. They're like, I have acid reflux and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but
it'll help it.
It will help it because your digestive system has what they call a function called negative feedback system. So what that means is if I was to take acid into my
HCl pepsin is really good for people with acid reflux as well.
Because my body is saying, okay, we got acid, so stop producing acid. And whereas the other way of thinking is, let me take some Tums, which is calciums, right? Because I have acid reflux, and that's going to neutralize the acid. And temporarily it helps, but what is it really doing? You're telling your body, okay, we're putting more base, so produce more acid, right? So that horrible cycle, the best way to get out of it is to take, what is that?
Pepsin, HCl.
Pepsin, HCl, or small amounts of vinegar.
That'll get rid of your acid reflux. Tums is like a Band-Aid. It's a temporary solution. If you want to actually get rid of your acid reflux, take acid supplements like HCl, hydrochloric acid. It'll actually, your body will get used to it, and you won't have an acid reflux anymore.
If you're watching or listening to this, don't just go, because if you have acid reflux, don't just run in and get
that's not medical advice.
This is not medical advice
for informational purposes only.
Because you will, if you take a higher dosage, you will literally go on the floor, grabbing your stomach, like, oh my god, I'm in
always
so much pain.
Consult with a doctor first.
You have to dilute it in water. It's a good way. Another thing about vitamin C, lemon in your water, is that although like lemon on a pH scale, pH stands for percentage of hydrogen, the amount of hydrogens in there. So if you take, like, lemon is, I believe, is close to stomach acid, is a pH of 2.
Yeah, it's low.
And if you take that, you're taking in on acid. However, when your body absorbs the lemon, it has a very alkalizing effect. So a lot of people think it's like, oh, I'm taking vitamin C or lemon water isn't that acid? But it has an actual alkalizing effect. Yeah. Last thing I wanted to touch on vitamin D is that vitamin D is created by shavings of lamb's wool, right?
Really?
Yeah. They take these lamb's wool and they shave it down, and they wash it, and they dip it in this chemical, right? And the oil that floats out of this lamb's wool and this chemical is vitamin D.
Wow.
And they take, they scrape the oils off the top, and they put it in capsules, right? And this is the standard vitamin D that people take in their supplement line, and oftentimes this is not like absorbable. Your body can't absorb
I would
this.
imagine.
One of the stories is that I have is my office manager. I had vitamin D's that was not that high, and she was taking all these supplements, like a lot of IUs, right? And she switched over to the brand that I carry in my office, and I showed her how to do it, and I tell her, like, take about 5,000 IUs in the morning, 5,000 IUs at night, and her blood work changed right away because it's the quality of the vitamin D. And if you take really good vitamin D, right, and not everybody, but across the board, some people, when they take it, they're like, wow, I feel a little bit happier. You could actually feel the effects of the vitamin D having a positive emotional response to it. Yeah. All right. What other last misconceptions do you want to address?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot of good ones.
Okay. All right. If you're watching this YouTube or listening to this podcast, please hit that like button.
Yes.
Subscribe, and please share it. And I believe as of today, we are hitting the 34th video on our YouTube channel.
Really?
Right? Consisting of all these little things that we did.
Right.
I believe that that's enough work for the algorithm to pick up. So I think
hopefully
we'll have a larger audience. And hope you guys enjoy it.
You could find us on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. YouTube is youtube.com/Qi Body and Spirit.
Yeah.
And Spotify is The Way of Biohacking. iTunes is also The Way of Biohacking.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and have a good one. Be safe, and have a happy holiday season.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.